العالمين سيدنا محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفدا ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night we started an introductory discussion on the idea of fasting and specifically the relationship between fasting and taqwa. So we took a look at a shortened, summarized version of Qira'ati's tafsir of the verse in Surah Baqarah 183. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablakum la'allakum tattaqun. O mu'mineen, fasting has been programmed and built into you, just like it's been programmed and built into those who came before you, so that maybe you can gain taqwa and become more God conscious. So Qira'ati broke it down and said that there was 3 points to look at here. That Allah is first starting off with kind, loving words. And when we find this kind of nida, when Allah calls us like this, it's a way to kind of help us reduce the hardship and sometimes the toughness that it takes in this kind of ibadah. The second point was that Allah also seemed to show us that, look, I know that this is difficult, but remember that people before you also had to do this. Right? Because sometimes when we find out that others have to do these same actions before us, we're not the first ones, then that also reduces the stress and anxiety in doing things. And the third point was this, that Allah was showing us just a bit of the possible result, the reward and the conclusion, the natija of what fasting leads to. Meaning fasting could perhaps lead to taqwa. Perhaps, right? La'alla. Maybe you get more God consciousness from this. So the question we had was, okay, well, how does that happen? How do we, or how does anybody, become more God conscious simply by fasting? So we wanted to examine that. The first thing we did was kind of break down the types of fasts that exist, or the types of fasters, right? We said you have cultural fasters who kind of do it just to push away cultural and societal pressures, right? So for them, fasting is just a part of life. It's probably the only thing that they hang on to when it comes to Islam, right? They might not pray, they probably don't read the Quran, they don't really get involved in the center, but at the very least, they're fasting in the month of Ramadan. And instead of us using this as a way to kind of denigrate them or insult them, we should say, look, at the very least, these individuals are attached to Allah, attached to Islam, and their fitrah is clean enough that it's attaching to Allah in this holy month. And this shows us the power of the holy month of Ramadan. That even the kind of most, let's say, openly sinning, those who have lost their Muslim Tawheedi identity, at the very least they're attached to Allah in this holy month. Even if it's that minimal type of fasting away from food and drink. So we should praise people who are sticking to this. The second type of fasters are those who are religious fasters. Meaning they can stay away from food and drink without a problem. They understand that fasting is an ibadah, it's a type of worship. But they try to increase their ibadah, their ibadat, and their a'mal in the holy month. So maybe they try to increase their recitation of Quran, they recite the different recommended du'as, all the different things that are available. But maybe for them, they're doing it just to kind of get points, right? Thawab and ajr. Maybe they're not focusing on the actual meaning, the ma'na behind what they're reciting. So for that individual, again, it's good that they're trying to increase the a'mal, and inshallah Allah rewards them for that. But to get that real reward, they're going to have to put in more effort, and we have to put in more effort in trying to figure out what is going on behind the scenes. What do these words and these du'as, what do they actually mean, right? To go past the simple, robotic, and parrot type of recitation. And the third level were the spiritual fasters. And that was the highest level. It's for those who say, look, we know that food and drink is easy. We have to keep away from that. All carnal pleasures we have to stay away from. We know that reciting and increasing our ibadat with presence of heart is necessary. But the one thing that they increase that others don't is that they see that one of the main barriers between us and Allah is the nafs, the ego. So what they try to accomplish in the holy month of Ramadan is not just fasting from food and drink and from carnal pleasures, not just fasting and trying to increase their ibadat, but they're trying to keep away from anything which becomes a barrier between them and Allah. Anything which increases their connection into this dunya. So we took that and we went forward and said, okay, so taking all of this in mind and keeping all of it in mind, what exactly do we understand? How does fasting lead to more God consciousness? So on each different level, there's a different way. The first level, for the cultural fasters, meaning those who at the very least keep away from food and drink and anything else which breaks our fast, at the very least, this is a simple way to rewire the way that we've been thinking. On a grander scale, the way that we have to examine it is this. God consciousness is a sense. It's a sixth sense. It's a way that we have to live our life. In the same way that taste, touch, smell, sight, everything else, all the other senses that we have, you don't have to activate them, right? They just kind of happen. Taqwa is just like that. Taqwa is a sense that we have to build up, right? When something, let's say, that'll lead us away from Allah comes close to us or we become aware of that, then we keep away from it naturally speaking, right? That's if your taqwa is strong. So one way that fasting forces us towards taqwa is that, look, Allah shows us that eating and drinking and all the other things which break our fast are the simplest ways and the kind of lowest levels of keeping you away from Allah, of lowering your level of taqwa. Nutrition can be a barrier between us and Allah. Why? We mentioned it last night. That sometimes if we're stuck in very materialistic, dunyawi type of thinking, we think that our energy levels, that our taqwa, our consciousness, the way that we act, our behaviors, our thoughts, our words, everything, our whole identity is strongly, strongly interlaced and connected to the way that we eat and drink and sleep, based on all these physical elements and components. So the first thing we have to figure out is that the case or not? So that'll be our first discussion, inshallah, tonight. If you can send us salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. So what exactly is the reality of the human being? What is our reality? Now there's three ways we can answer this. Either it's completely physical, it's an equal mix and equal parts of physical and spiritual, or it's something else. It's one of the others on top. So the idea of a human being being completely physical is obviously an idea that atheists, empiricists, most materialists, they'll ascribe to this idea, right? They say, look, human beings are just a bunch of atoms and particles and signals and, impulses, that's it. In the most extreme version, people like Sam Harris, for example, they'll deny the idea of free will. They say, look, we're just products of cause and effect, physical cause and effect. That's all we are. So for them, yes, absolutely, your nutrition matters, your sleep matters, and that's all that matters, because that's what leads to cause and effect, physical cause, material cause and effect. You have to be able to empirically verify everything. That's one way of understanding the human being. The second way is that no, human beings are more than that. We're not just our physical bodies. We're not just a bunch of atoms and particles and things like that. We go beyond that. We also have a spiritual component as well, right? Which we call the soul, for example. And some scientists might ascribe to this too. They might say, look, we understand that there's something beyond the physical world, maybe. Call it consciousness, call it the soul, call it energy, whatever you want. But we know that there's not just a physical body. There's something else that makes a human being what he or she truly is. So what they say is, look, we're equal. We have a physical component, but we also have a spiritual, metaphysical component. So you have to take care of both of them in their proper right, in their proper domain, in their jurisdiction. So they say, look, when it comes to the physical things, you have to take care of it using physical cause and effect, physical means, right? So, for example, if it comes to, let's say, your energy levels in the day, you have to be able to eat properly. If you don't eat properly and sleep properly, then you won't have your proper energy levels. But they say, look, on the other hand, if you're talking about this kind of deep connection to your having a purpose in life or having morality, this is not something that's defined in science. It's outside the jurisdiction of science, right? A scientist can never say that this, for example, moral virtue or value is scientific or better, right? They can't define that. That's outside their jurisdiction. It's not empirically verifiable. But they say, look, metaphysics or philosophy, that's that jurisdiction. That's where you can say whether something is good or bad or evil, or it has faith, something like that, yeah? So over there they say, look, that's where spirituality can come in, or philosophy can come in. So they don't deny that side of it. They say, look, we're human beings, we need both of those. You need to make sure your physical components and causes and effect is taken care of. Likewise, you also have to make sure your spiritual lifestyle is taken care of. So they say, look, sometimes you can take care of that through religion. Sometimes that might mean through music or through yoga or whatever it is. They don't really specify necessarily. Sometimes we Muslims, especially us Shias, sometimes we fall into this category as well. We think that, look, sometimes there are physical things that we have to look at and ask scientists and look at empirical studies. But sometimes we have to look into the spiritual idea in the spiritual realm. So we kind of make a distinction between deen and dunya, or rather dunya and deen, right? The physical world and the spiritual world. So let me give a very famous example, a very contemporary example. Think about this idea of mental health, or rather mental health issues. Right now, this is a very important topic, but it's also a topic that you can find people on extreme ends on both sides. What have we seen classically? We've seen classically, especially from ulama and scholars who came from the East, they said, look, if somebody suffers from some sort of quote-unquote mental or spiritual issue, like depression, anxiety, stress, etc., this is because of a spiritual disease. It's a spiritual problem. Therefore, they need a spiritual sort of solution. They need a spiritual remedy. So they would say, look, the reason that you're depressed is because you don't have tawakkul. You have a lack in your iman. You're not reciting Quran enough, etc., right? So this is how they would describe the issue. And of course, nowadays, people have completely fought against this idea, right? Many famous, both scholars and I'd say those who are in, let's say, the mental health industry or field. So they've come and they talk about, they say, look, mental health can only be described as a biochemical imbalance. That's it. Don't bring spirituality into this. Spirituality has its own world, its own domain, its own scope. Mental health is something, it has to do with your mind, right? It has to do with your cognition. It's neuroscience and neurology. It has nothing to do with hadith and Quran and things like that. So they say, look, you need to use cognitive behavioral therapy, speech therapy. We have to talk about, in certain cases, using certain medications, right? That'll fix these imbalances. So you have these both kind of extreme cases. Now, both of them have some bit of truth, but they're pushing these extremes too much, right? This is our humble opinion, and anybody who disagrees, you're welcome to disagree, and we can discuss it, inshallah. But I want to offer you the other side of this as well. Why are we as Muslims trying to separate the spiritual and the physical world? Has this ever been the approach of the Quran, of the Hadith, of Allah, of the Ahlul Bayt and our ulama? Of the ones who understand the reality of the soul and our physicality? No, this has never been our approach. Yes, people have taken it to extremes, but typically this is because those individuals didn't have both of those components and they didn't understand both of the components where they belong. Yes, we say that everything belongs in its rightful place, but we have to understand something called the hierarchy of knowledge and the hierarchy of reality. And this is the third opinion and the third viewpoint, which we'll mention now. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the first opinion said we're just physical beings, right? Just matter, blood and guts and all that stuff, particles, molecules, that's it. The second group says, no, there's physical and there's spiritual, but they seem to want to separate both in almost every situation. But the third group, which is the opinion of our urafa, the opinion of our philosophers, and many of our scholars, is that, look, there are two different realms. There is the spiritual realm, the metaphysical realm, and the physical realm, but they don't exist side by side. They're not equal, and they're not separate. The metaphysical spiritual realm sits above the physical realm. What happens in this the higher spiritual metaphysical realm dictates what happens at these lower realms. And they talk about this whole hierarchy of being, right? These different darajat and maqamat. You start from the highest, which is, for example, Allah in His true dhat and His essence, and then things slowly start to descend. And they said that there are 7 total levels, which is why they say we have 7 levels of heavens and earths, right? samawat and ard, there's 7 of them, sab'a. 7 of these come down until we get to the lowest one. And that lowest level is what we call a dunya. The lowest, right? Dunya literally meaning the lowest of the low. Why? Because it's the most divorced and devoid of metaphysical truth and reality. It's the one that's the most disconnected from Allah. It has a possibility of getting back to Allah, but it's the most forced to be disconnected. Because we're starting at the top, which is Allah. We slowly move down to the realm of the angels, Jabarut, Malakut, all of these things. We get to Barzakh, Tamathulat, all these things, which I don't want to explain, right? It will take a while. And then you end up at, for example, Dunya, which is where we exist right now. Or, in parentheses, where we think we exist. But again, we'll have to leave that alone for another time. So what we say here is this. Let's go back to the idea of mental health. What we say is, yes, we definitely see physical manifestations in this world. We see, for example, that there might be a biochemical imbalance in a person who is suffering from, let's say, depression, anxiety, stress, bipolar disorder. We don't deny that. And we don't deny that some of these causes are physical. But if we're going to completely deny the spiritual and metaphysical, then we're losing the plot here. We're denying the reality of the soul, and we're denying what is been proven through our irfani proofs, through our philosophical proofs. And this is why in Islam, especially in the words of our urafa and our philosophers, we have something called spiritual psychology, right? Because normal psychology in the West only considers the kind of physical idea of man, right? Just what's in our brain, what happens there. Again, this idea of biochemical imbalances. Even that, of course, I just saw an article the other day that actually in this regard too, this is something that's highly debated within medical literature as well. They're saying that, look, all these kind of prescriptions and all this therapy that goes on for mental health issues, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of good, strong medical literature and research behind it. And of course, we know those who are involved in the medical industry, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, we know when there's money involved, when there's a lobbying involved, it's tough to get to the truth there. And there's been a lot of literature just dedicated to this idea of what is the reality of medical truth. And a lot of doctors themselves, those who are at the head of some of these medical journals, are saying, look, most of the stuff that's being put out in these journals is a bunch of nonsense. People are just after notoriety. They just want their names to be put in a journal. They're told by a certain lobbying group or the industry to put out certain results. And that's something we have to be very, very careful of, right? Again, I'm sure these people, some of them, especially the Muslim ones who are trying to advise us about mental health issues, they have the best intentions in mind. We don't deny that. But it's tough to give us the full picture unless a person's looked through the philosophical and the irfani ideas as well, right? Because these things are very important. Because as we're saying, human being is not just physical, but it's spiritual as well. In order to truly give us the antidote and a remedy for what's wrong with us, we need to have both components, both the physical and the spiritual. But also recognizing that everything starts with the spiritual cause first. Now, again, as a kind of disclaimer here, because some people respond and say, look, how can you say that I'm, for example, suffering from depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or any of these mental health issues? How can you say that it's because of iman or tawakkul or the lack thereof? How can you say that? So look, let me give a kind of short response. First, let's look at the individuals who are bringing the fully physical argument. Right? Even the ones who are Muslims, for example. They say, look, it's a physical thing, but then they try to bring in the Quran to say that we can heal ourselves also to the Quran, right? So for example, I've heard many of them, these proponents say, Allah bi dhikrullah tatma'innul qulub. Say, look, you can fix yourself through the Quran. So you can gain some of that healing through the Quran. We said, look, on one hand, you're saying that this is a physical problem, but on the other hand, you're trying to bring in a spiritual remedy and a spiritual cure. So what you're kind of saying, maybe the proof hasn't been thought out. The idea hasn't been fully borne out. You're saying that, look, if you increase your recitation of Quran, you might be able to increase your physical health. So doesn't that maybe imply that with the lack of recitation of Quran, there might be a detriment to your physical health as well? Maybe. If you're saying that increasing Quranic recitation might help you physically, again, meant biochemical imbalance, then doesn't that maybe also imply that a lack of recitation of Quran might lead to a biochemical imbalance? That's just a natural inverse of the proof that they're offering and the solution they're offering. That's it. Again, it's up for debate and discussion. But according to our opinion of the Urafan, the philosophers, that yes, this is definitely the case. Because our spirit and our soul requires these certain metaphysical components and antidotes and its own metaphysical and spiritual nutrition. And when we take away that component, then that makes the physical suffer as well. Let me offer a sort of proof, which is a narration attributed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil far. In this narration attributed to him, he says, Inna quwwatul mu'min fi qalbi. He says the quwwah, the strength, the power of a mu'min resides where? Fi qalbi, in his heart. And again, we know that in narrations, they don't mean physical heart, right? They mean the spiritual heart. He continues, and it's almost as if the Prophet wants to himself offer a proof for those who might disagree. أَلَا تَرَوْنَ أَنَّكُمْ تَجِدُونَهُ ضَعِيفَ الْبَدَنِ نَحِيفَ الْجِسْمِ وَهُوَ يَقُومُ اللَّيْلِ وَيَصُومُ النَّهَارِ. He's like, haven't you ever seen people, right, who, let's say, they're very weak in terms of their body, right? They're frail. So normally the things that somebody who's very weak and frail, they can't do things which are physically, require an exertion, right? So he says, look, haven't you seen people who are very, very weak, very frail, maybe they're older in age? Haven't you seen these types of people who are standing up and who are up all night reciting Salatul Layl, reciting all these ziyarat and adhkar and du'as and all these things, and all day they're the ones fasting? So if it was about physical strength and physical power, then they couldn't do any of these things. I don't know if any of you have tried to stay up even a part of the night. I mean, inshallah, right? The nights of Qadr are coming up. It's not an easy thing, right? It's almost wajib for us in our centers to make sure that there's some sort of caffeine available. Otherwise, most people can't survive the night, right? We have to make sure, okay, every hour we need to take a break. We have to have, we have our water available. We have caffeine. We have some carbs. Although I'm going to rant about carbs, inshallah, maybe tomorrow night, but I don't want to be super kind of pro-keto here. But anyway, so we have to make sure the physical stuff is taken care of. That's what happens in every center. So the Prophet is saying, look, you've seen people who are weak physically, but they're able to accomplish things that you can't, even with your physical strength. This spiritual strength is what allows certain physical actions to happen. Right? So this is the proof he's offering. Let's give another proof, another kind of historical proof, when we look at the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farjum. Okay, firstly, what was his diet? What was the Imam's diet? You tell me, what kind of things did he eat? Bread, okay, even like that dry barley bread, right? Things like that, okay. Maybe milk once in a while, like yogurt, sometimes honey, salt, that's it, right? Very simplistic diet. So, I mean, you guys maybe know better. I've looked at the narrations. As far as I've seen, I haven't really seen the Imam, for example, a whole set of narrations talking about the Imam's workout regimen. I haven't seen him that the Imam would wake up and do like 200 push-ups a day. I've never seen any narration which talked about him having, 100 grams of protein per day, or talking about a certain carb intake or anything like that. All we see is a very, very simplistic diet that most of us, if we were to look at it, for example, when we see how on certain nights he would break his fast, he would complain to his own family members that there's too many things here. Why are there 3 things here? I only want 2 things on my sufra, on the dasrakhan. Why is there 3 things here? Salt and yogurt is enough. So this is the same individual with this little amount of nutritional value and nutrition going into him, this very little caloric intake, very little protein, etc., etc. He's now the same one that does what at Khaybar? According to historical narrations, he's the one who's going and ripping off this whole door of Khaybar and using it as a shield, when other men couldn't do that, right? They say 5, 10, 20 men couldn't even touch this door. So where's that strength coming from? The same one who was the first on the battlefield when other people were running away or were stuck in the back. Where'd that strength come from? We don't have this, the way he's described in narrations, he's not described as somebody who's huge and muscular and towering. Yeah, maybe Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam is something different, right? Maybe we can make an argument there, but not for Amir al-Mu'mineen. You don't really see that the way he's described. So it seems like he's very weak, he doesn't have a strong diet, but he's the one who's fighting everybody on the battlefield. He's the one showing this physical strength. What does these 2 ideas show us? That all of this physical strength at least sources or stems from what? From spirituality. So am I denying science? No. Am I denying empirical truths? No. Am I denying the value of having a good, hearty meal at some part of the day and getting your proper caloric intake? No, I'm not denying any of those things. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not saying any of this. What I'm saying is we have to, if we're trying to understand the relationship between fasting and taqwa, one of the first things we need to do is start to restructure the way that we view these ideas. At the very least, the way that we eat and drink, but at a higher level, the way that we view how food and drink affects us. Now, what's the example for us in the month of Ramadan? When we go out to our places of work, and sometimes the fast gets to us, right? We feel the fast. Sometimes our tongue slips. We're rude, we're mean to our coworkers, right? We lose our patience with our family members. And what do? Yarhamukumullah. We blame it on, oh, sorry, I'm fasting. Now, imagine that. All of us, we love to go and do tabligh and da'wah to all non-Muslims. And what kind of da'wah are we doing in the month of Ramadan? Hey, I'm fasting to get closer to those who are impoverished, right? I'm trying to connect to my God. Also, I'm a jerk because I'm fasting. That's what we're really showing them. So what reason would somebody want to fast? If that's what we're showing them, that, yeah, I lose my patience, I lose my cool, my akhlaq and my etiquette, my adab is not intact. Why? Because I have to obey something that my God told me to do. We're really screwing up the religion of Islam if that's the case, right? So we have to be careful about blaming our religion for our own bad behavior. So perhaps one of the things that fasting can help us do is say, look, when now we know that shaitan is locked up, we know that food and drink is stopped, maybe the cause for my bad behavior, for my bad akhlaq, is not these other things. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who's causing all this stuff. Maybe something deep down within me, I've got a spiritual problem that I need to fix. Not the lack of caffeine, not the lack of caloric intake, not shaitan. I can't blame him anymore. It's me. I'm the one. ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي. I'm the one oppressing myself. If that's the one point that we can understand in this holy month and start to work on our own spiritual characteristics, then this would be a very, very successful month of Ramadan for us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, again, some practical solutions we can take into consideration. First is, look, if we're the type of cultural fasters who are just trying to work on food and drink this month, then okay, stick to that. But see if you can change the way that you eat and drink. At least just the diet that you have. And try to keep away from things which, let's say, might tire you. Again, because it's popular right now, and because I have experience doing this, this 1 meal a day idea, OMAD, with a ketogenic or low-carb diet has proven successful for a lot of individuals. So I would advise you, maybe give it a shot. Cut away things like processed foods or fried foods, foods that are high in carbs. See if it helps you out. It might. Right? Even in the month of Ramadan, if you can, let's say, cut out 1 cup of chai or 1 cup of coffee, see, maybe it'll, refresh and rejuvenate your system. Beyond that, maybe rethink then how you connect with your own self. Are you blaming things on fasting? Are you blaming things on food? If that's the case, let's try to restructure the way that we view reality and make sure that, listen, I know that I believe that there is a metaphysical, spiritual realm, and I also know that this realm dictates what happens on the physical realm. So I shouldn't blame things and simply connect them to what's happening physically, but I should also understand what's happening at the higher realm. So it's me, my soul, my nafs, which is determining my bad physical traits. So I should try to reconnect myself and see, can I increase my ibadat in this in the month of Ramadan? Is there something that I think I can do which will help me improve my akhlaq? If there's something I see, then I should try to improve that, inshallah, even if it's something small. Now, what about this idea of trying to break down our ego? How do we destroy that? Well, that's going to be a very, very difficult thing. Inshallah, we'll try to discuss that starting tomorrow night, inshallah, when we go to our main topic. Tomorrow night, what we're going to start to do is the first thing is because our series are basically, the series that we've gone through are all connected. So in the first hand, we went from this idea of from Muslim to Mu'min. So we'll spend a few minutes recapping what we discussed in 2016. Then we'll move on to our new series, which will be the successful Mu'min. How do we go and improve our strength and our level of Iman, practically speaking? And it'll be based on and using a criteria of Surah Al-Mu'minun. So for those who can, I would say look at least the first 10 to 15 ayat of Surah Al-Mu'minun. We'll be going through them ayah by ayah every night, doing a short tafsir and explaining some practical points that we can take away from that. وآخر دعوان أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.